No more taxes? That's the plan? But first, we're getting the biggest tax refund ever?
Taxes.
Taxes.
Or taxes.
President Trump isn't just talking about tax relief. He's talking about rewriting the whole tax code.
So what does this mean for us? Well, this is what they're saying.
You're going to see the largest tax refunds in history.
But that's not even the biggest promise.
In the not too distant future, you won't even have income tax to pay.
All because of the big beautiful bill?
Big beautiful bill.
Big beautiful bill.
Big beautiful bill.
When I think of taxes, I think of wasteful spending, questionable decisions, and my money going to who knows what. And it's one of the biggest expenses we have. But did you know we were never supposed to pay taxes in the first place? It was created to pay for the Civil War in the 1860s. Then it was supposed to go away. But it never did. Instead, it kept going up. Now, let's see what actually happened over the next 100 years. Because things got crazy. First, World War I hits. The government said, well, we need money to fight this war. So the tax rate goes from 1% to 77%. Then World War II happened. Same thing. This time, the top tax rate hit 94%. But every time they raised it for a war, they dropped it back down. Only a little higher than before. So the one big beautiful bill passed last July, and they're calling it the biggest tax cut in American history for average day Americans.
The bill would also let people deduct more of their state and local income taxes for the next 5 years.
Now, there are some things in here that are really good, but each one of them comes with a really big catch. We'll get to those later. First, let's start with what they're promising. Because if you work a job where you get like tips, maybe a waiter or a bartender or a hairdresser, you're not gonna pay taxes on those tips anymore. Same thing for overtime. No taxes on that either.
No tax on tips, overtime.
Now, if you're a senior, there's a new deduction that could mean 0 taxes on your Social Security. Also, for parents, they're giving you $1,000 for every newborn. Then, if you live in a state with high property taxes, like California or New York, for example, you can deduct way more from your house, like 4 times as much. So there's something here for a lot of people. But that's not even the big one. Remember earlier when we talked about tariffs, how the government used them to fund everything instead of taxing our paycheck? President Trump is trying to go back to that. I believe that's why this bill was created.
Call it a great big beautiful bill, because that's what it is.
Cut taxes for everyday people, then charge countries to make up the difference. They're saying tariffs are going to bring in so much money that eventually we won't have to pay income tax at all. He's even talking about sending every American a $2,000 check. Same thing that happened during the pandemic, paid for by tariffs. So the White House says this is specifically designed for the middle class. They're saying typical families will get $10,000 back this year alone. But after everything we just learned, is this actually true? So I started looking at independent groups like the Congressional Budget Office. Their entire job is to analyze bills like this. But here's what they found. If you're in the top 0.1%, the richest of the rich, you're saving over $100,000 a year. But if you're in the bottom 10%, you're actually losing money. After it's all said and done, about $1,200 a year. However, the White House disagrees with this. They actually called the CBO the Crooked Budget Office. So you've got independent analysts saying one thing and our officials saying another, with our money caught in the middle. Because it's not just taxes. They made changes to healthcare too.
Cutting $1.7 trillion in this bill, and you're not going to feel any of it.
Millions of Americans rely on Medicaid, which is government health insurance for low-income families, seniors, and people with disabilities. The White House says they're not touching that.
Here's what I want on Medicaid. We're not touching anything.
But independent analysts say $1.4 trillion in cuts.
A new estimate predicts more than 10 million Americans would lose their health insurance.
The healthcare system is a whole nother rabbit hole. So if you want me to dig into that one next, subscribe. Now, here's one that affects all of us, the deficit. This is when the government spends more money than it brings in. Think of the deficit like maxing out your credit card every month. You're not just in debt, but you're also paying interest. Right now, America is about $36 trillion in debt. We're paying over $1 trillion a year just in interest. You would think, who cares? But that's our money. I mean, that's money that could go to improving our schools and fixing our roads. So this bill is supposed to help to reduce the deficit by $2 trillion over the next 10 years. However, Analysts are saying it's actually doing the opposite, adding trillions to our debt. But here's the part that got me the most interested. No more income tax. We're gonna keep our whole paycheck.
What we're taking in is so great, it's so enormous, that you're not going to have income tax to pay.
But if the government isn't taking money from our income, where's it coming from? Tariffs. Remember, earlier when we talked about how the government used to fund everything before income tax existed, 90% came from tariffs. We want to go back to that because over the years, America kept lowering those tariffs. There were free trade deals, cheaper products from China, globalization. We got used to the idea of paying less for stuff, and the government made up for it by taxing us more. That's kind of the trade-off. Cheaper TVs, but higher taxes on your paycheck. So now the big beautiful bill cuts your taxes, but someone still has to pay for everything, right? Trump has already been raising tariffs on other countries, and he's saying eventually they'll bring in so much money that we won't need income tax at all.
That they're paid by foreign nations, so much money.
That's the plan. But here's where it gets complicated. Tariffs bring in a little bit of money. Income tax brings in a lot of money. And I mean, like, not even close. Let me put this into perspective. Before the president raised tariffs, we were bringing in about $77 billion a year. Now it's closer to $200 billion, projected to go up even higher. So it's working. But income tax, that brings in $2.4 trillion a year. So even after collecting triple in tariffs, we're not even close. That's like comparing your allowance as a kid to your parents' entire salary. So to make tariffs replace income tax, you would have to raise them by a lot. Goods would be so expensive, it just wouldn't work, right? Because when tariffs go up that high, companies, they don't just absorb that cost. They pass it on to us. That TV from China, it's gonna cost a lot more. Those shoes from Vietnam cost more. Your phone, your laptop, your headphones, all way more expensive. Even groceries. Let me put it this way. You might save $5,000 on income tax, but spend $6,000 more on everything else. So remember when I said it was actually gonna cost you $1,200 more per year? This is why. Prices and inflation went up because people didn't save that money. They spent it. So the more money we have in the economy, the less each dollar is worth. That's inflation. And with all these tax cuts that we talked about earlier, each one has a really big catch. Remember, no taxes on tips, no taxes on overtime, seniors are gonna pay less, and parents are gonna get money. But let's look at the fine print. We'll start with the tips. Only 3% of American workers actually get tips. 1/3 earn so little that they don't even pay federal income taxes anyway. So for them, nothing changes. Now, what about parents? Parents are getting $1,000 for every newborn, but it goes into a Trump savings account that you can't touch until your child turns 18 years old. I don't remember that being in the headlines. Now, what about no tax on overtime? This one's even trickier because it doesn't apply to your entire overtime paycheck. People get what's called time and a half. These new tax breaks only apply to the half part in time and a half. If you make $20 an hour and your overtime rate is $30, the only part that counts is that extra $10, not the full $30. And here's the thing, if you're already in a lower tax bracket, you're not paying that much to begin with. For the bottom 40% of Americans, this whole no tax on overtime thing, it's gonna save them less than $10 a year. So it doesn't look like the middle class is actually benefiting as much as they promised. But there's another reason people are so frustrated. It's not just that we're paying too much or this really benefiting the wealthy, it's government waste. The reports I've read said since 2003, the government has spent $2.8 trillion in improper payments. That's money that went to the wrong people, the wrong places, or just vanished. Medicare alone was responsible for $54 billion of that. They claim a lot of this spending has gone to deceased individuals and potential fraud. So who's really getting that money? Here's the question I keep coming back to. Is this bill actually fixing the problem, or is it just moving money around? When you add up all these tax cuts, about $1 trillion is going back to the top 1%, and about $1.1 trillion is being cut from the programs for the poorest Americans. So if you're a normal family making $60,000 or $70,000 a year, you're not getting $10,000 back like they promised. That's not how this works. That number, that's closer to what the wealthy get. You're getting maybe $500. But here's the thing, you're spending most of your money just to live. You have groceries, gas, utilities, clothes, school supplies. All of this costs more money now because increased tariffs. And when you add it all up, that $500 you saved, it's gone. Plus another few hundred on top of that. But the wealthy, they aren't really affected. Sure, their stuff's gonna cost a little bit more. But when you're making 7 figures a year, an extra $100 on a TV doesn't really move the needle. And this is the kind of stuff that happens when the people writing tax bills are the same people funding political campaigns. They have so much influence, and they're able to shape the rules in their favor. We're supposed to be a country where everyone pays their fair share, where tax cuts actually go to the people who need them the most. But our tax code has become more and more complicated. More loopholes, more deductions, more incentives for specific industries. The top 1% has an army of accountants and lawyers finding every possible advantage. The rest of us, we use TurboTax and hope for the best. So we've been told a story that this bill is about helping working families. But now there's pretty compelling evidence that the biggest benefits by far are going to the people who don't need the help. And it's being paid for by increasing the cost of everything we buy.